Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Astro Max Show. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking us out. In this video, we're going to be talking about the 6 named cults that are inside your Genestealer Cults Codex. What we aim to do is help you have a better gaming experience, be it for narrative or matched play. So we're going to be looking at all the named cults in this codex. Now, originally, I wanted to do this as one awesome video, but upon completion of filming it and looking at some of the editing on it, it was going to be about an hour long, so I decided to strip it down into 2 separate videos. This is part 1. We're going to be looking at Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, HiveCult, and the Bladed Cog. Part 2, we're going to be looking at Pauper Princes, the Rusted Claw, and Twisted Helix, and then the Mirrored Cults are going to get their own video in part 3. So that's what we got going on this week. So this is part 1. Be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications so that you know when parts 2 and 3 do get released. All right. Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor. The methods of the Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor exemplify those traits that make the Genestealer cults such a grievous threat. They lay their plans with horrible, inhuman patience and exploit humanity's bloated bureaucracy and innate greed for their own ends. They are true and terrible parasites who have spread further through the Imperium than even the most alarmist doomsayers dare suggest. So there you have it. Plans, generations in the making when it comes to the Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor. What I like about them, narratively speaking, is there's this dynasty that rules over them, the Trist dynasty from their home planet. And I always like when you can do a narrative and you're not the biggest, baddest thing in the galaxy, right? That sort of cheapens the entire experience if just right off the bat you're the top of the food chain. So when it comes to Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, it's fun. It can be very narratively flavorful to have your cult serve the Four-Armed Emperor, and especially if you're doing prolonged campaigns that are going to have some story element to it, it's an easy way to have this sort of great influence of this dynasty, this Trist dynasty that rules over the Four-Armed Emperor, to sort of keep things under control and not let your own narrative or your players' narratives, if you're doing more of a GM thing, kind of get too inflated. Now, as far as rules interactions go for the match play side of things, Four-Armed Emperor is fantastic. It's a really simple rule set in that everything that's here is really easy to understand. So we take the first bullet point of their cult creed, Subterranean Ambushers. Right, first thing you get, reroll charge rolls made for units with this creed. Super easy, army-wide reroll charge rolls. If you're playing your first game of Genestealer cults, or maybe you just finished putting a couple of your models together and you want to get an idea for some of the rules interactions, I would highly recommend just pick Four-Armed Emperor because everything here is really easy to understand. Now, the combo that I really like about Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor is you're going to take a Primus and with the Warlord trait Inscrutable Cunning, and you're going to take a Nexus with the Relic Cranial Inlay. Now, what Inscrutable Cunning is going to allow you to do is if you're using a strategic ploy or battle tactic stratagem, and it targets a Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor unit within 12 inches of your Warlord or whatever character is using this trait, Inscrutable Cunning, you're going to reduce the CP cost of that stratagem by 1. Now, you can only do this once per stratagem. So if you're using Reckless Demolitions, right, you're going to reduce the cost of that CP by 1. So it would be 0 for that one time you use it. Now, the next time you use it, it goes back to being its normal, 1 CP cost or whatever. So this is a nice trait for just making your CP go a little bit farther, which is, again, if you're new to playing Warhammer, one of the harder things for newer players, myself included, to master is CP resource allocation. You got to be able to take a small pool of CP, whatever you're starting with, and have it last and be a meaningful, impactful thing to the game for 5 turns. A lot of what you'll see is just slamming, command reroll after command reroll, which is not a very efficient way to use your CP. So something like Inscrutable Cunning, where you can get a lot of stratagems for 0 CP, is going to help that CP last longer. It's going to help you understand the game better. You're going to have more enjoyable first game experiences. Another reason, huge reason, why Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor is my go-to for new players. The other part of that combination, the Nexus with the Cranial Inlay, that Nexus is going to be able to use your Warlord, whatever character is next to them, they're going to be able to use it across the board. So you aren't limited to that 12-inch distance on the Inscrutable Cunning for your Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor units. You can actually get it all over the board. That is a little bit more, a slightly more advanced step up from just running the basic Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor stuff. So that might be a little bit complicated if you're just starting out in the game, if this is like the second or third game you've played, but it is definitely something to try and practice, because the Nexus is a really, really nice utility character to have in your list. He doesn't cost a lot, and the more practice you can get with his abilities, the faster your gameplay is going to be with it, and the better you'll be able to explain it to your opponent too, because there's definitely some traps of feel bad gotcha moments around the Nexus and some of his abilities. The HiveCult. Unusually warlike and overt in their practices, the HiveCult combined fanaticism of the Broodkin with the destructive might and martial training of the conventional Imperial Army. The result is a force of unrelenting destruction and conquest. Who knows how many worlds the HiveCult have already claimed in the name of the Star Children, or how many more will fall to their onslaught. So, as the flavor text here indicates, this is the militarized version of the Genestealer cults. So if you want to lean heavily into a Brood Brothers-esque flavor, or if you're like, hey, every game I'm going to use a Brood Brothers allied detachment, cool, HiveCult is awesome. I've actually not spent a whole lot of time playing with HiveCult, but the more I was reading over this and doing some brainstorming, the more I really want to throw together a HiveCult list and practice with them, because there's some really fun stuff here, and there's a lot of flavor here as well. A lot of the characters that the codex kind of gives you an idea of are going to be miners, workers, the blue collar downtrodden people of the neglected forgottens of the 41st millennia. But with the HiveCult, they're all part of like military organizations. So you get like gangers, you get smugglers, you get actual generals that have turned and been corrupted by the Four-Armed Emperor. So you get a whole different sort of flavor profile on your narratives when you jump over to the HiveCult. Looking at the HiveCult cult creed, we have disciplined militants. This is going to be two parts. So the first part, you're going to get units with this creed are eligible to shoot in a turn in which they fell back, but if they do so, then until the end of the turn, each time a model in that unit makes a ranged attack, subtract 1 from the hit rolls. That's not bad. It certainly can come in handy. I don't necessarily love the subtract 1 from hit rolls rider on that one, but I think it's the second bullet point on this cult creed that is really pulling me towards it to try and see if I can make a list that is like fun narratively, but still also competitive at the same time, because that's always the line you got to thread as a narrative player. Units with this creed can perform actions in a turn in which they fell back or advanced. While a unit with this creed is performing an action, that unit can shoot without that action failing. So a lot of times when I'm playing narrative stuff, we're not always doing Crusade missions. A lot of times we're doing missions out of one of the Grand Tournament packs. So your normal secondaries are a real thing. Actions, definitely a real thing. So the ability to advance up the board with, like, say, bikes on turn 1, between your scout moves and your normal moves and advancing, you can probably get to those markers closer to you. You can perform an action while you're on them. Awesome. You can still shoot while you're on them. Even better. And then, turn 2, you can bring your neophytes up on those now. Say you got two objectives on turn 1 that you threw banners on. Right now, you can bring your neophytes up right in that spot to cover them, and your bikes can continue to push further down the board. The other thing I really like about this cult is the Warlord trait. Now, the first time I read this, the first couple times I've read this, I didn't really pay much attention to it, but I'm starting to lean more into the shooting aspects of the cult because I'm building some models that I think are really cool, that are definitely more of a shooting thing. So the Warlord trait, Hive Lord, has sort of captured my attention a little bit more, and definitely my imagination. As the warlord the warlords of the Hive cult often hail from gun-running gangs and black market military groups in which firepower is valued above all else. Come on, that's awesome. That's just awesome. So the ability that actually gives you is, while a friendly Hive cult core unit is within 6 inches of the warlord, each time a model in this unit makes a ranged attack, an unmodified hit roll of 6 scores 1 additional hit. I like that it's not restricted to anything other than just core. So it can be bikes or infantry or anything that has the core word and shooting on it. It has no stipulation on weapons, so it works with your grenades and your demo charges. So bikes throwing demo charges, boom, hell yeah, 6s, extra hits. Works with seismic cannons, works with even just your basic neophyte shotguns, right? They're assault 2, so you can get, let's say it's a normal loadout on a 20-man blob of neophytes, so you're going to have 4 heavy weapons, a banner, and maybe you put a melee weapon on your squad leader, so 6, so 14 shotguns. So it's still going to give you 28 shots. Yeah, I can do addition and subtraction on the fly. 28 shots with a shotgun, you're going to hit 6s. Like, that's going to be ballooning up to larger numbers. That is an insane amount of firepower that you can throw out, even though it's, only so-so on strength and it doesn't come with any AP. If you're shooting at something, there are things in the game that have high toughness, lots of wounds, and not great saves. So, a lot of orc stuff. Orcs in general don't have great saves. But anything that's like at a 4 save, right? If you can just throw enough 50-50 saves onto something, 1 through 3 is going to come up. However, the downsides of the Hive Cult, the relic is the strat is whatever. Basically, it's a free crossfire, which sometimes will be helpful. Most of the time it won't, because there's lots and lots of ways to get crossfire onto a unit. And then the psychic power is a witchfire, so we're not even going to bother with it. Next up, we have the Bladed Cog. Now, this is a cult that I've always had kind of a weird relationship with. Back in 8th, towards the end of 8th, when I first started playing Genestealer cults, this was hands down my favorite cult, both from a lore flavor standpoint and also just from an ability standpoint. It's definitely, it's not like garbage in this codex, but it is not as cool as it used to be. It struggles with a lot of things. Flavor and lore-wise, however, it's still a great cult. The Bladed Cog. If every world within the Imperium can be viewed as a single component of a greater machine, then the Bladed Cog seek to weaponize those components one at a time, the better to destroy the entire edifice. Their masters leash iron and flesh alike to the cause, and their cybernetically enhanced broods are as resilient as they are deadly. So this is definitely where your sort of cybernized Borg-esque looking cults come from. So huge possibilities for kit bashing here with Mechanicum models, which would be just insanely fun to do. So flavor-wise, Bladed Cog is still awesome. Rules match playability-wise, it leaves quite a lot to be desired here. You get a 6+ invulnerable save. You get to reroll 1 wound when you're shooting with or fighting with a unit. And then you add 3 inches to the range characteristics of your weapon. So that's what your creed gives you. The Warlord trait you're never going to use. It's a before the battle, you select 1 enemy unit from your opponent's army. And then while a core unit is within 6 inches of your Warlord, you get to re-roll wound rolls against that unit. So you have to telegraph to your opponent what unit is really important for you to kill. You then have to make sure that your warlord and a core unit are within 6 inches of each other and in range of that thing to benefit from this trait. And that's just not a good setup. You want traits and relics and things to either serve a very specific, powerful purpose, or to be more broadly used in your army. Especially if you're starting off, stick with relics and traits that just have broad powers so that you can use them in a lot of different situations, and you're not trying to move and position your army to one exact specific setup, because that's just a lot to keep in mind when you're playing your first, 20 games. The relic, the Mark of the Clawed Omnissiah, great name for not a lot of payoff. It's a 4+ invulnerable save, and at the start of each fight phase, roll 1d6 for each enemy unit within engagement range of the bearer. 2 to 3, it suffers 1 mortal wound. 4 to 5, 2 mortal wounds, and on a 6, you get 3 mortal wounds. So, okay, I mean, it could be kind of fun, whatever, if you're doing something really, really fun and narrative-wise. That can be a fun relic to have. But a 4+ invulnerable save, and then wanting to be in fight engagement range of your opponent. There isn't a lot in the codex that... So, like, a Patriarch already has an invulnerable save, so this does nothing for it. Your Primus, even with a 4+ invulnerable save, is going to die pretty quickly in melee, no matter what. I suppose you could put it on the Abominant. The problem is, okay, we'll throw the Primus in there. You have 3 truly melee characters in your army. The Locust is cool, but you're never going to put a relic on him. So you have 3 truly melee characters. One of them already has an invulnerable save, and there's already a relic in the book that gives you an invulnerable save and does cooler things than just, the possibility of a couple of mortal wounds here or there. So, Mark of the Clawed Omnissiah, great name, kind of worthless. And then your stratagem here, you can pick a unit, you can pay X amount of CP, and you can give it a 5+ invulnerable save. Now, here's my take on Bladed Cog. If you want to do a heavy aberrant build, okay, certainly if you want more than 1 unit of aberrants, then Bladed Cog is the way to go. If you want to do 3 units of 10 aberrants, or maybe you want to do 9 or whatever, so you can leave some room in your Goliath trucks for other models, Bladed Cog is probably not a bad option, because the damage reduction on the aberrants, because you can now with Bladed Cog give them a 6+ invulnerable save, and then you can use your genomic enhancement to give them a 5+ feel no pain. You can make a pretty tanky unit that's hard to shift and is fairly decent in melee. Aberrants I always find to be either too squishy, because they don't have a native invulnerable save, and they don't have a native feel no pain, and they don't have enough attacks to really be a super melee threat. So the best hope scenario you have is to make something that's just annoying to get out of the way. And Bladed Cog, with a 6+ invulnerable save, 1 unit can have a 5+ invulnerable save, another unit can have a 5+ feel no pain, and there's a way to get, with your Biophagus, you can get that genomic enhancement on all of your units eventually. But with Alchemist Supreme, you can start the game with a unit that's at 5+ invulnerable and a unit that's at 5 feel no pain. Now you have 2 fairly durable units you can rock around the board with. The reason I say that they're never really super lethal is because they're stuck with 2 attacks. And so even in a maximum squad, you don't have your 20 attacks. And it's hard to get rerolls and stuff on them because they're not core. So that's why you got to bring the Abominant. But he's like a whole 100-point or 85-point tax to just get rerolls on some of your on one unit. So yeah, aberrants exist in a weird place. I think with boarding actions, aberrants might have a place in boarding actions, but I'm very unsold on them on the tabletop. Competitively, I could see 5 of them. Right, I could see taking 1 squad and throwing in a Goliath Rock Grinder to just, throw demo charges out of it and crash it into something and have it, 5 aberrants jump out. a quick insert I want to put in here because I forgot as we were looking at the Four-Armed Emperor and the HiveCult and now Bladed Cog, right? We've skipped over psychic powers on these. I spoke about it a little bit in HiveCult in that you're never going to use that psychic power because it's a Witchfire. But I do want to clarify for newer players out there, the psychic power that you pick up when you pick one of these named cults is free. So you get it in addition to whatever your character, either your Patriarch or your Magus, already knows. So, you know, the Patriarch is no 2, right? So this would give you this would be a third one that you would know. It doesn't increase the number that you can cast. It's just a free spell that you get. So it definitely incentivizes taking one of the named cults because you don't get that in the mirrored cults. And some of these spells, psychic powers, forgive me, are really cool. The one I like so far that we've talked about, I don't like the Bladed Cog one all that much. I don't like the HiveCult one. I do, however, love the Four-Armed Emperor psychic power Undermine. Subtract 3 from pick one unit. It does have a warp value 7, so it is kind of hard to cast. But if you successfully manifest it, you're going to select an enemy unit, excluding anything that can fly, within 18 inches invisible to the Psyker until the start of your next psychic phase. You're going to subtract 3 inches from the move characteristic of models in that unit. You're going to have advanced rolls for that unit, and you're going to subtract 2 from charge rolls for that unit. So it is a really good psychic power for messing with your opponent's ability to move around the board. The ability to strip your opponent of some key movement is really good. Now, the downside to Genestealer cults and psychic abilities is that they have more psychic abilities that are awesome than they're ever going to have casters that can use them. If you take a Patriarch and a Magus, you're still limited to 4 casts a turn, right? And most lists are going to have one or the other. Rarely are you going to take both. So really you're looking at 2 casts per psychic phase. So you really want to make sure that you're casting the best 2. Undermine is a good one. I don't know if it's the best one. So there it is. We did it. We got through all the named cults in the Genestealer Cult Codex. I do hope that this video was helpful if you're a beginning player trying to decide which cult you want to run at. I hope it was entertaining if you're a veteran player and you just wanted to get some more information about the cults or listen to somebody else talk about the cults, because if you're anything like me, you can't get enough Genestealers. We did not cover mirrored cults in this video. That is going to be saved for Thursday. We're going to talk about mirrored cults, and while I'm talking about mirrored cults, you're also going to get to watch me do some kit bashing using some Necromunda Orlocks, a Brood Brothers sprue, and some Neophytes. We're going to be building some custom Neophytes, following some directions that I found on the Genestealer Cult Reddit. Seemed like a fun project, so we're going to be doing that. So be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications so you know when that video is coming out. Thank you so much for watching this video. Give it a like if you liked it. And until next time, geek your own way.